How's that new sport called tennis coming along?
Well, we haven't the proper object to hit across the court.
And why not?
I don't know.
Do you suppose we could use an egg?
No, an egg's too fragile. What about a brick? We tried that, the racket broke. I know a lemon. Too messy.
I think it's missing something.
Yes, I think it was, physical? No, that's not it.
Wasn't it physics?
Yes, I think so.
Yes, of course. The book that Sir Isaac Newton made. 'Tis one of the sacred relics Brother Alex carries with him. Brother Alex, bring up the physics textbook.
Jesu dorime, gona heis requiem.
How does it work?
I know not, my liege.
Consult the book of texts.
Text chapter 2, verses 9 to 81.
And Saint Adam raised the textbook up on high, saying, Sir Isaac Newton, bless these thy laws of physics, that with them thou mayest blow up thine enemies into tiny bits, metaphorically speaking. And the Sir Isaac did grin, and in celebration of their great victory, the people did feast upon the lambs, and sloths, and carp, and anchovies, and orangutans, and breakfast cereals, and fruit bats, and large...
Skip a bit, brother.
And Sir Isaac spake, saying, First shalt thou open thy physics textbook, then shalt thou count to 3, no more, no less. 3 shalt be the number thou shalt count, and the number of the counting shalt be 3. 4 shalt thou not count, nor either count thou 2, excepting that thou then proceed to 3. 5 is right out. Once the number 3, being the third number, be reached, then lobbest thou thy physics textbook towards thine object in need of applying physics to, who, being naughty in my sight, shall snuff it. But before leaving, Sir Isaac did giveth Saint Adam fair warning, that the physics textbook shalt only supplieth thou with 18 laws per object. That being said, chooseth thou wisely. Amen.
Amen.
So, what do we hit across the court?
Book of Sports Epilogue, verses 1 through 4.
In such sports, as predicted by Sir Isaac's college roommate Fred, as tennis, thou mayest useth a spherical object consisting mainly of rubber.
Right. 1, 2, 5.
3, sir.
3.
Oh my god!
What do we do now?
Upon impact with thine objects in need of physics, stateth thou the laws that thou doth wish to apply.
Right. Consult the tennis book.
For sports such as tennis, laws such as these are recommended. Momentum. This applies to tennis because you need to get the ball over the net, so it needs to build up momentum. Gravity. This applies to tennis because the ball comes down out of the air every time, and what's responsible for it? Why, gravity, of course. Trajectory. This applies to tennis because the ball needs to fly in a certain path or have the right trajectory in order for it to land in the target location. Acceleration. This applies to tennis because the ball must accelerate to the point where it will have enough velocity to make it over the net. Potential energy. This applies to tennis because the ball and the racket both have potential energy, which is then released as kinetic energy with the use of force. Kinetic energy. This applies to tennis because both the ball and the racket are, or should be, in motion. Force. This applies to tennis because you need to use a force on the ball to move it. Inertia. This applies to tennis because if you dive for the ball and don't stop yourself, your inertia will cause you to fall. Projectile motion. This applies to tennis because the tennis ball is a projectile. It is traveling with vertical and horizontal motion. Energy. This applies to tennis because all of the objects involved, even you, have the capacity to perform work. Motion. This applies to tennis because all of the main components are moving or changing in place. Thrust. This applies to tennis because you are forcibly pushing or shoving the ball with the racket. Velocity. This applies to tennis because the ball changes position in a specific direction. Mass. This applies to tennis because mass times velocity before a collision equals momentum after a collision. Law of conservation of energy. This applies to tennis because you must transfer pre-existing energy from you to your muscles to the racket to the ball so they may fly over the net. You cannot create energy out of thin air with which to propel the ball. Net force. This applies to tennis because the wind might be blowing against the ball, which would decrease the total amount of prevailing force. Lift. This applies to tennis because when you hit the ball, you must get enough lift out of it to get it to go high enough to go over the net. Speed. This applies to tennis because the faster the ball is moving, or the more speed it has, the more difficult it is for your opponent to return it to you.
Yeah!